Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're all okay on a very warm afternoon. It's slightly cooler here in the church. I know that in the course of the afternoon it does get very, very warm here. But I hope you're enjoying the warmth and not feeling too hot and bothered. As you know, we've spoken about the possibility of returning to masses here in our three churches. We've already had permission and started the sessions on private prayer, and people seem to have appreciated that, coming and feeling so grateful to be able to have a little time with our Lord here in the Blessed Sacrament. And so that's been a good thing, and thank you to everybody who's helped to make that happen. The next thing, of course, is having masses definitely at the weekend and maybe also in the week. Permission has been granted by the diocese for masses to take place here, but I feel it's only right to wait until the permissions have been granted for the other two churches before we start again. And that's involved a lot of work, and I want to thank all those people who've done that work, preparing the risk assessments mainly, which is just a horrendous thing, preparing the churches, getting stewards, and trying to make sure everything is as it should be once we can do this. Well, I'm very grateful to you all. I know sometimes I've been a bit, difficult, probably too strong a word, but concerned about it, because I worry about these things, that if there's too many regulations and people are just going to say, I'm not going to bother. And that does trouble me. And so I did say that I was not prepared to have any of our churches looking like a police crime scene with tape everywhere, nor was I prepared to have people booking to come to Mass online as if it were a cinema. There are other ways of doing these things tastefully and sensitively, which have in fact happened. But that's the point, trying to make people welcome. I have to confess that until I came here, I wasn't fully aware of the full significance of welcoming people. Of course, the building itself needs to be welcoming. And if it's full of glass, full of perspex, full of tape, the message that's given to people is, come in here at your peril. And that's going to put people off. It's supposed to be a place of reverence, a place of quiet and calm, where we can come and feel at peace with our Lord and with ourselves. But it's not just that, it's how you welcome people into the church, and that's where I possibly hadn't understood the full significance of it. In this parish here in Hinckley, over years and years, nobody welcomed anybody. In fact, nobody spoke to anybody. It still amazes me that there are people in this community who have been going to the same Mass as others for 50 years and do not know their names. But it happens. I find it inconceivable, but that's what happens. Because no one was encouraged to greet each other or to share, and when they used the word community in Hinckley, they always referred to the Dominicans in the Priory, not to the people in the church. But that has changed, thanks to the efforts of Mary Forrian and her wonderful friends from the Sunshine Club, who began that process of standing at the back of the church and welcoming people and giving them hymn books and so on. And in Old Shilton, of course, let's be fair, it can be a bit OTT, so you'd go into Old Shilton and get kissed. It's not everybody that wants to be kissed, really. I can't cope with it. It was a bit OTT, but that's thankfully calmed down a bit as well. And in Market Bosworth, people are a bit more self-contained, they know each other, and a bit more measured about things, and that all happens and has happened for quite some years. But this isn't just about giving people hymn books and mass sheets. It's much more than that. And again, it took me a long time to fully understand what we meant by the ministry of welcome. that there is much more to it. First of all, there is making a person feel that they are welcome, because we do not know what effort it has taken for that person to get there on a Sunday morning. The present situation is, I don't mean just with the COVID, but in modern times, is much different from what it used to be. For example, if one partner in the marriage was not of our faith, in the past that person would say to their husband or wife, well, we promised to bring these children up in the faith, and I'm going to leave you to do that and not interfere and support you as much as I can. And that's happily what's gone on in very many people's homes over many years. But now it's somewhat different. Sometimes the partner says, oh, well, we can do shopping on Sunday, or the children need to play rugby or go dancing. And I don't really see the point anyway. And so there is a tension often in families, which has to be resolved by the Catholic person. And sometimes they have to negotiate in order to get themselves and their children to the church. And all it takes is some insensitive priest like me to say, oh, nice to see you, I haven't seen you for ages, in a rather sarcastic manner, for that person to be completely diffused, if you like, dismantled, think I'm not going here again. And I'm very sorry that sometimes in the past I've not thought that out and maybe said things that didn't make people feel welcome, or without knowing why they hadn't been there for a while. Yes, some of them could have drifted away from it. Some of them could be working, some of them could have family challenges, as I've spoken about, of course. Of course that's true, but it was wrong of me to give them the impression that, they were sort of tolerated. I'm very, very sorry if I've ever done that. I'm sure I have. And I know when I have, I feel dreadful and I want to just dig a hole and crawl into it. But the welcoming is making people feel part of something. And so the smile they get from the person who's giving them the hymn book and showing them the newsletter and so on is very important. And the greeting they receive from other people in the church, and afterwards, again, helps them to feel that they belong. Especially if people, for example, have come here maybe from another church or no church, sometimes even a bit curious about what this Catholic Church is, that's very significant. I know that for many years, Father Terry had a visitor's book in the church in Old Shulton, and people were asked to make some comment, and he was very assiduous about this. He wasn't just looking for compliments, but he wanted to make sure that if people came, they did feel welcome, and often those comments were very complimentary. And so thank you for making us welcome. And that used to make Father, I know, feel very happy and very content that both he and his people had done the right thing. And so this welcoming people back into church isn't just saying this is when this is going to happen. There's much more to it. Many people still feel afraid about coming out. They feel anxious. And many people have got out of the habit of it and say, well, I don't really see the point. I can watch all this on telly, I don't have a collection. I can sit here in my pyjamas and that's me. I can pray on my own, I'm doing fine, thank you. I don't really need all of that. So there's all those kind of issues involved in reopening the church for Mass and also bringing people back here. It's a huge, huge thing. And of course, you say, well, will anybody come back? The received wisdom in other parishes who've started say that much lower numbers of people have come back to church since it was reopened. Maybe a third of what would normally be there. Yes, it is, of course, the holiday time, but also there are still people who feel anxious about this. They don't like the idea of having to wear a mask in church. And they can't sing, and some people love singing, and there's all sorts of issues. But that seems to be what other priests have said when they have managed to open their church for Mass. And that is how it's going to be. So when we do it, it's my hope that we will resume the Mass schedule as normal, And there will be one extra Sunday Mass on Saturday, either at 11 or 12, depending on my friend Mark and when he can record it. But the recorded Mass that we have on Saturday will then become a public Mass, this thus giving the opportunity to space people out more over the weekend Masses. If we are able to do this in September, I will be celebrating those Masses entirely on my own, because Father Brian will be visiting his sister in Greece. And if, for example, we are to find that at one Mass there's nobody there or hardly anybody there, then we will cancel that Mass until matters resume. So it's a very flexible thing, and it's a very movable feast, as we call it. We don't know what is going to happen. We don't know if people will come back in the numbers that there had been. I know that many people are very desperate to come back to Mass. They've said it to me. I'm missing the Mass. It's lovely on television, Father, but we want to be there with you, with our Lord, and with our family. And many people have said that. And it's an interesting thing, isn't it, when we feel we can pray on our own or celebrate on our own. I remember a comment that Bishop Malcolm made years ago, and I've told you before, about when he was in London one week, and it happened to be his birthday, and he was getting a train back to Newcastle, and he had to wait 2 or 3 hours for the train after the meeting he'd been at. And so he went into a posh hotel, ordered himself a big steak and half a bottle of wine to celebrate his birthday, and didn't enjoy 1 minute of it because there was nobody there with him. You can't celebrate on your own. There has to be somebody else with you. That applies to when your team has won the league or the cup or whatever, when some great family occasion has taken place, or when we celebrate the Mass. We need to be together. And of course, people also want to rekindle the friendships that they've made. There's a particular group of people that I'm very pleased about, who are anxious to meet the lady, that nice lady that phones me up every week, Father, to see how I am. I'm really looking forward to seeing her and meeting her face to face. She's been so kind, and I really appreciate it. And so there's a lot of that as well. Those are the things that are associated with coming back to Mass. Once we have received permission from the diocese, I will send you all a letter telling you what we need to do and how we're going to do it. It won't be as it was before, but hopefully it'll be something that in time we can work around and work, and it will involve a lot of people offering their services as stewards or cleaning the church and so on. It's not an easy thing, but if that's what it takes until such time as we can feel free of this virus, which I remind you is still very much here, that's what we have to do. That's what we'll do. But you'll get the letter the week before, either on the website or with your newsletter that's delivered to you, and then we'll be able to proceed. So I suspect that might be the beginning of September. I suspect it might be. Hopefully it will be anyway. And then we say, what about First Communions? What about confirmation? I've already written to the parents of the First Communion children, offering to have 4 separate occasions with 10 children at a time. I need to see them and to see whether this is appropriate and when it might be appropriate. And then also to talk about confirmation, whether the bishop wants to come and do this at all, or whether he might give us the facility, or how we would do that and when we might do it. And then there's things like parish groups, outreach projects, and all those other things starting up in our 3 communities, the plays that we want to do, the Sunshine Club, Alternativity, and all of those other things that come in the autumn of the year. How will we do it? Will we be able to do it? So lots of questions and lots of things to pray about and prepare for. There is, however, a deeper question too, and it's to do with our view of the church, period. Will there be any church? For me, not just a building, but a community and even an institution, how will that be when all this comes to its conclusion? And those are questions that we need to ask, very deep, searching questions, not only about our own life within the church community, but the life and the place of the church community in modern times. It is quite clear that for most people, organised religion, particularly in the Christian church, is no longer relevant. If you don't believe me, just look back to our friend Mr. Johnson's plan for opening different places. The places of worship came at the very end, after restaurants, pubs and supermarkets, because presumably they were deemed to be of very little consequence. And this, of course, is nothing new, and I know I've said this to you before, going back to 1934, to T.S. Eliot's wonderful poem called The Rock. Let the vicars retire. We need more chop houses, not churches. On Sundays we must be motoring to Hindhead or Maidenhead. If the weather is fair, we will go into the country for a picnic. If it is foul, we'll sit at home and read the papers. And the churches are not wanted anymore except for funerals and big weddings. That was in 1934. Some might say things have not changed. The present situation was in fact predicted some 50 years ago by a man who was, without any argument, the finest mind of the Catholic Church in the 20th century, Father Karl Rahner. He was a friend and colleague of a man called Joseph. They studied together, worked together, studied together, and wrote books together. Joseph was better known as Joseph Ratzinger, who of course later became Pope Benedict the 16th. And in his early days, Joseph Ratzinger was a very forward-thinking theologian along with Karl Rahner, and something happened to him in the mid-60s to make him change his mind about many things and sort of go backwards, really, which was a great tragedy for a man with such a mind as that. Karl Rahner was the man, and 45 years ago, when I was a new priest, I was sent to a very intelligent person in Sheffield, Father Emil Putman, again, whom I have spoken to you about very many times. And he was the most amazing person, a man of great vision, a German who had 5 languages, a deep theological insight, but also a pastoral insight. But here's a funny story. He wasn't very practical about some things. And there was a famous occasion when a lady rang up and she says, "I think I need a bit of religion, Father." So I went up to this house on a housing estate one afternoon and found this lady, a rather frumpy lady in her late 40s, lying flat on the floor in a room surrounded by knickknacks. And she said, "I've done my back in, I'm not right, I'm not well." And I said, "All right, I think I need religion." I said, "Oh, fine." And he said, "See all them knickknacks, Father, they're all pinched." He said, "Oh, right." I said, "You don't think, what do I say next?" Anyway, we got on well, and it turned out that her daughter was a heroin addict, big time. And I remember, this is to say many, many years ago now, she showed me the daughter's journal, which quite frankly frightened the living daylights out of me. And she had written in this journal a parody of the 23rd Psalm. "Heroin is my shepherd, there is nothing I shall want." I thought, what is this? And so this poor lady had obviously got all this to deal with. And sometime later, we had a burglary in the church. And next to the church, there were some parish rooms, a bit like ours, and these drug addicts had broken through the ceiling, come in, got into the church, levered open the tabernacle, and stolen 2 ciborium with the Blessed Sacrament, thinking they could sell them, and then just threw the rest on the floor. It was a very disturbing time indeed. And Father Emil, he was heartbroken. And I said to him, you see, now these ciboria, I said, are very valuable, very expensive, and very precious, but actually worthless, because they are what they are. They are for holding hosts for Holy Communion. So their market value is actually nil. And I said, even if these guys could get them to a fence, he couldn't get rid of them anyway. And so he looked at me and he said, a fence is in the garden. I said, no. I said, a fence is a bloke who gets rid of stolen goods. And he looked over his glasses like this at me and he said, you and I mix in entirely different worlds. And so about a week later, this frumpy lady rang up. She said, you've had a burglary, haven't you? I said, well. She says, I know where the stuff is. It's my daughter's mates who did it. I said, right, you tell them from me to bring that stuff back, because they aren't going to be able to sell it. And I said, they did a terrible thing, and we'll say no more about it. So a few days later, the phone went late at night, and there was this chap on the phone speaking to Father Emil. The gear's in the wood next to the church. I put the phone down. And he said to me, what's the gear? I said, that is the stolen property. Oh, right, And so we went into this wood late at night, and Julie found the two ciboria, sadly without the Lord as well. And the next weekend he got up in the pulpit and he said, you'll be very pleased to know that we have regained the two ciboria that were stolen. I'm delighted about it, and that is thanks to my colleague and his contacts in the underworld, he said, at which point we all laughed. So that was the sort of man that he was. But he was a man of huge vision, and the things that he was doing then on what's happening now, he said to me, you need to prepare yourself for the day when there'll be no more priests, which of course there aren't. And the first Christmas I was there, he gave me a book written by the aforementioned Father Karl Rahner. And the book is called The Shape of the Church to Come, written in 1970 for the German church. It's a remarkable book, quite remarkable. His analysis of the situation 50 years ago was very insightful and is not dissimilar from his analysis of what the situation is today. And his recommendations about what to do about it are very well worth thinking about and reflecting on when we are asking ourselves, what sort of church am I going to come back into? What sort of church will it be where there is no more normal? So next week I'm going to talk to you about Father Karl Rahner's book and what he suggests and what he says. You will be amazed at a man having such insight all those years ago. It's a remarkable thing, and I hope it will be helpful to you when eventually we do recommence our full community life here, which I hope will be as soon as possible.